I'll tell you where there's been a lot of energy spark around the whole shuttle down in Los Angeles. We just spoke on the phone last segment with photographer Matt Javot, who put together a beautiful time lapse that we've been showing you via our video stream. But the man responsible for getting the shuttle to its home now at the California Science Center is Dr. Ken Phillips. He's a curator there at the California Science Center in Los Angeles, and this didn't happen overnight, did it, Dr. Phillips?
No, it actually didn't. It sort of was a 20-year process that it sort of unfolded over. Doesn't seem like that looking back on it, but that's how long it took.
And is it one of those things where over the 20 years it kept building as it got to the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, pretty much in fits and starts, though. I mean, for example, we had the loss of the Columbia spacecraft in 2003.
Right.
So that was sort of midstream in this entire effort. We started this about 1991 or so. So there were some valleys there as well. And there was lots of uncertainty. At first we didn't know who was even going to make the assignment of the orbiters. It wasn't determined that the administrator, Charlie Bolden, would do that until relatively recently. So lots of uncertainty along the way.
What do we have? Is it 4 different locations in the United States where you can get up and close and personal with a shuttle now?
Yeah, and in fact, we kind of make a nice family tour over time to do that. You can see the test model. That's the Enterprise at the Intrepid Sea Air and Space Museum in New York. And then the Atlantis is on display at the Kennedy Space and Rocket Center. They'll display that with the payload bay doors open like it's in space. The classic model, which is called which is Discovery, actually, that's at the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. And that'll be displayed classically on its gear. And then we are having Endeavour ultimately displayed vertically in full launch configuration with the external tank and the solid rocket boosters. That's a few years down the road, but that's our goal here.
Wow. And you're almost answering my question I had for you was where, now that it's there, that was a big accomplishment. What is the future? What can we expect out of a visit to see the Endeavour?
So it's going on display almost immediately. In fact, October 30th we opened to the public, and we're having Endeavour in its horizontal configuration. There's a lot of graphic interpretation and a couple of videos that we've assembled, one of which includes a time lapse, much like the one that your former guest had was discussing, and it will also have the opportunity for you to do some virtual fly-throughs of the cockpit so you can see what it looks like up there. It's kind of hard to get people in there.
And then during the time that it's in this horizontal configuration, the Science Center is building a sort of a permanent home for it, and that's where it will be in its launch position?
That's right, yeah. That is the Samuel Ocean Air and Space Center. It'll be in the launch position. But it won't just be Endeavour. That will include our entire aerospace collection, which includes aircraft of a number of vintages, all of our flown Apollo Command modules and Gemini modules. So it'll be a very comprehensive treatment of the aerospace subject area. And indeed, Endeavour will be in a launch position, and we're going to design in some way a gantry that will allow guests to actually ascend the entire length of the vehicle so you can study it from every conceivable perspective. So it won't be like a model at some distance. You'll be able to get really up close and personal to this.
I was wondering, ever since I heard that it was coming to Los Angeles, the number one question I've had that you can answer for me is, can you touch it? Can you actually reach out and put your hand on the shuttle?
No, we'll have people there to slap fingers who do that. No, you won't be able to touch it, but we're planning to open one of the payload bay doors, and with the gantry balconies as we imagine them, you'll be able to step a foot or so inside the payload bay. It's a huge cavernous space, so I think you'll get you get a pretty good idea of what an astronaut would feel like if they were working, payloads inside the bay, conducting experiments and things like that. That's our objective.
What famous payloads, or which famous payloads, I should say, were actually released into space via Endeavour?
Oh, there were so many. The Hubble telescope
was
well, that wasn't launched by Endeavour, but it was the first Hubble surfacing mission that was done by Endeavour. Intel satellites were wrestled into the payload bay. There was a couple of the International Space Station modules that were lofted into space by Endeavour. Cool. Endeavour played a significant role in assembling the International Space Station, which is, it's an iconic vehicle for global cooperation. There's 16 member nations on that.
Wow.
So, looking at this time lapse, the Mission 26, the big Endeavour, I even love the name of it, and watching Endeavour pull into what is its temporary housing for right now, but even though that's temporary, it's really impressive to see it pull into that bay.
Yeah, it's very much like a hangar. It will give you the feeling that one might get if you saw a large vehicle of an aerospace nature being in the hangar, which would be worked. We took those large K-Mags, those wheels that you saw Endeavour move through the street on, those are off now in the Endeavour. It looks like it's kind of floating about 12 feet above the ground, and we've designed the exhibit so that you can walk entirely under the belly of the aircraft. So you'll be able to get really up close and personal and look up at the tiles and see the tiles' serial numbers, every one of which is unique. So we want people to get as close to it as we can safely allow.
We're speaking with Dr. Ken Phillips. He is a curator at the California Science Center in Los Angeles and holds the title of being the man who brought Shuttle Endeavour to Southern California. That's quite an achievement. And what sort of competition were you up against?
Well, as far as we know, there are about 29 institutions, like ours around the country that had competed for an orbit. It boiled down to 21, and then NASA whittled that down to 13. I think what was maybe a little unique about the Science Center is that aerospace science is not the only content area that we have here. So we're thinking that maybe NASA found it interesting that we could introduce many people who were not already familiar with NASA's work,
Right.
the kind of stuff that they did. Plus, we're a free organization. You don't have to pay anything to come here.
Mm-hmm.
That's stunning to me.
Yes.
That you would have. Will the shuttle be a separate? Like it's free to go to the Science Center, but then in order to see the shuttle, you have to pay to see that exhibit?
No, not at all. Just come. We are suggesting in the opening months, because the crowds are going to be so large, that you purchase a time ticket, which is, I think it's like $2 or $3, something like that. But that's just to guarantee, a visit with your orbiter. But, you can take your chances and come down, and you might be able to get in.
That's great. That is so
Yeah,
great.
that is really, really wonderful.
Because that gives you access to everybody that lives in the Los Angeles area could get on public transportation, get to the Science Center, and not have that money wall between you and seeing a piece of history.
That's exactly right. I mean, the orbiter, it is a national asset. We all own it together. I mean, you guys up there in San Luis area and everything else, it's ours. And we're just honored to be those who have been asked to take care of it for. So that's how we look at it. So it's just an honor to have it here.
Was Shuttle Endeavour partially built in California? In essence, is it coming home?
Oh, it was entirely built in California. It was built from spare parts, largely from Atlantis and Discovery, things that were left over, fabricated entities for that. And it was assembled in Palmdale, as you know, and then sent to Edwards, and it flew from Edwards Air Force Base out to Kennedy Space Center for its first mission, which is in May of 1992. So yeah, it is a California baby, as they say.
Appropriate
Totally.
for it to come back here for its retirement.
Yes.
Oh, totally, absolutely. It really did feel like it's come. And a lot of people have seen it on display there as we're getting it ready. And it sounds kind of crazy to say it, Randall, but it feels like it belongs there. I mean, it feels like it's home.
Yeah.
It really does.
Well, we're certainly happy to have it home. And I'm
Yes.
wondering, from time to time, when weather would not allow shuttles to land in Florida, California was an alternate landing spot for several of the shuttles.
That's
It
right.
cost NASA a lot of extra money to land in
Yes.
California because they had to fly
Then
the shuttle.
piggyback it back
Yeah.
to
Yeah, that's right.
Florida.
Was Endeavour ever part of that? Did it ever have to land in California?
Landed here 7 times.
7 times?
Okay.
Yeah, 7 out of its 25 flights. Yep.
Oh, okay.
And
7
then
out of
its
25.
final flight.
Yeah,
And the-
that's
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Boy, that was fun to see it flying overhead. I caught a glimpse of it here on the Central Coast, and I have friends and family up in the Bay Area that caught it with the flyby up by the city, by the Bay. And then they're in Los Angeles. Talk about some amazing shots, many of them taken by the LA Times with a Hollywood sign in the background and other LA. Where were you to watch that portion of the experience?
Well, I was up at 2 a.m. that morning doing press interviews at the airport and shuttling back between
So to speak.
one of the airport sites that was far away from the landing and then to the actual United hangar where it actually landed. So I was at the airport all day, and we actually, it was a funny thing, we actually had the least visible flyby, although the one that we had was extremely low because we were right there at the airport. But it was great. It was an incredible day.
Dr. Ken Phillips, we are so thankful that on this Sunday morning you took some time to speak with us here on Eat, Drink, Explore Radio to talk about the shuttle's new endeavor there at the California Science Center. You can see it yourself starting October 30th, and then several years down the road, if you want to see it in a different position, you can check it out again when it's in its vertical launch style. Dr. Phillips, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Randall. Have a great one.